One of the things we're going to be looking at is what are political systems and how do you look at them in a popular society? First off, let's define what a political system is. It's the institutions and the activities which link the people, the politics, and the policy together. Now, there are all sorts of descriptions, and we could take off and be on this for some time, of different types of political systems. One of the very first analyses of political systems was done by Aristotle. Autocracy, a government which is based on its self-granted authority. Aristocracy, which is an autocracy in which people, on the basis of their social status or inherited position, become politically active. And one of the questions that currently being bounced around in the American race for the presidency is, are we in the process of establishing a political aristocracy? Plutocracy, Plutos is the Greek term for wealth, rule by the wealthy. Theocracy, theos means theology, means religion. The current struggle that we see in the Mideast is effort by some groups like ISIS to establish theocratic rule. A kleptocracy. One of the very real problems that Africa has had is that the political systems have been taken over by a handful of people who are primarily concerned with enriching themselves. And then, of course, there's the concept of democracy. Demos, the term demos in Greek means the people collectively. There's a lot of discussion about the role of money in politics. We'll return to that later on in the course You can take a look at this particular article from the Detroit Free Press of 2011, which says the only practical difference between the candidates' campaign committees and the new dedicated super PACs is the lack of fundraising limitations, and we might also say any visibility or transparency of the super PACs. The net impact of such chicanery, that is trickery, is to assure that the nation's elected representatives, like its financial assets, are in the pockets of an ever more exclusive minority of 21st century plutocrats. Notice the terms. So what's a democracy? One in which the government is run by the people, either directly or indirectly through elected representatives. But who rules? The entire society? A direct democracy? The drafters of the Constitution, we're going to see, were really and truly worried about direct democracy, that the majority could overrule or could impose itself on the minority in bad ways. A particular class of people. One of the questions today is democracy in the United States becoming an elitist democracy? Probably some of the success Donald Trump has had is stirring up the feeling of a lot of people who feel dispossessed that government is currently being run by elites that they have no control over. An absolute majority where you have to have 50% of the population on board before you can do something, or a limited majority in which there's a majority of those who are allowed to participate, in which case the question is, who do we allow to participate in the decision-making process? Now, we could get off on a long-term and very lengthy discussion of elitist, pluralist, or participatory democracy. The ideal is a participatory democracy where all citizens share in the selection of the government and the making of the policy. But that assumes that they're willing to do so and knowledgeable enough to do it. Pluralism, which is a more recent concept, says that society is really the result of the political competition and bargaining which occurs between organized groups. Elitism, where we choose between elites and the elites essentially govern. Direct democracy versus indirect democracy, topic we're going to have to deal with. In direct democracy, you've got equal access, equal opportunity, and equal responsibility, and at least a majority, one half or more, are required to make the decisions, and the entire group then accepts the decision. Or an indirect democracy in which the voters elect a small number of people to represent their interest and to govern, to make the laws, and to decide on policies. In a democratic society, we have to agree on certain things. That there will be a system of political and popular participation. There will be a commitment to freedom and equality, an independent judiciary so that the decision of the judges is not controlled through the political process. This is more of an ideal than a reality because judges tend to also have political philosophies. Civilian control of the military and the police, and lastly, a cultural commitment to democratic ideals. And what are those ideas? Freedom, the rights of individuals to live their lives without government restrictions, and we probably ought to say without justifiable restrictions. And one of the big issues right now has to do with whether people can carry firearms anywhere they want to. Those who are arguing that the Constitution grants them complete and absolute right to carry any kind of weapon they want to, anywhere they want to, would lean toward the unfettered restriction of rights. And those who argue and insist on some controls over firearms argue that government has a responsibility to protect the lives of those who are not carrying firearms. Equality, the rights of people to be treated equally under law. Right now, there is a tremendous backlash against the kinds of political and police authority which has been shown in recent years, which obviously tends to treat some people, particularly based on race, very differently than those who are a part of the majority. When we talk about freedom, is it freedom from the government or is it freedom guaranteed by the government? Now we'll have a long set of discussions on that when we get to civil rights and civil liberties. Some things that are conditional. The right of privacy, the right to be left alone. But is it an absolute right? Well, we now argue that government must show a compelling social necessity to regulate the lives and actions of its citizens. We've seen that with laws dealing with persons who are gay. Freedom of speech and freedom of press. Are there limits? If so, what are the limits? How do we restrict it? And we've seen a sea change in the attitude toward information regarding sex. Now, most of you young people in my class, and all of you are young people, at least from my perspective, don't realize the time when you could be prosecuted for books that simply discussed sex. Libel, slander, treason, all big issues. Now, when we talk about equality, there's some different views on equality. Is it equality of opportunity or equality of result? What are the activities that take place in a political system? Well, you have to be able to organize, to be able to urge others to take the same position as yourself, to be able to meet with officials of government, to lobby them, to try to influence the outcome of elections, and also, obviously, voting. So if you're going to have a true democracy, there must be universal suffrage, there must be free elections, people must have the opportunity to organize into political parties, and at a lower level they should be able to organize into interest groups, and the media should not be under the control of the government. Well, what are the sort of extra-governmental institutions that exist in a true democratic system? Obviously, political parties, interest groups, and a free media. And that sort of wraps up our discussion at this particular point in time.